Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast,
where we bring Lordship to life every week, just proudly declaring Jesus Christ as Lord over all. And I think the older I get, Pastor Andrew, the more I realize that if Jesus isn't Lord of all, everything disintegrates.
Yep.
And there is no coherency. There's no logical consistency. It ends up getting just nuts. And I think as cultures drift farther and farther away from the Lord, which is something we're seeing right now, we were just talking before we hit the start button here. It's amazing right now, just the chaos that is everywhere in the world. I think last time we were on this podcast and chatting with you, we were talking about what's going on in Toronto with the truckers and vaccine mandates and all this kind of thing, and just the tyranny and the government overreach. And the sad thing is, I mean, that's just our friends to the north who have been most like us. You know, I mean, like our Canadian brothers and sisters, while they do not have an American form of government, they certainly have shared American values in terms of liberty and freedom and all of that. And even a God-centered country, I would say a Christian country in their roots. So it's just disturbing as that has progressed. We're recording these things about a week or so ahead, so we're trying not to talk too much about current events, because when this podcast airs, it might not be current anymore.
Yeah.
But as we're recording this, we're looking at a serious threat for Russia to invade the Ukraine, which would be a bloodbath, and obviously praying for God's mercy there. But just chaos. We got chaos in our own borders. We got chaos in our own government.
Yeah. Supply chains.
Yeah.
All these different things. People talk about the inflation, the economic. I mean, I don't know all this stuff. There's a lot of noise out there, right? And I would be absolutely a cynic right now if it weren't for the hope in Jesus Christ.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to give an update too, because even locally, we're fighting some battles down at the State House with good folks representing us down there. We're actually, I think, going to see some really good progress with a bill that it's called House Bill 1040. My glasses on here, 1041. But it basically deals with protecting biological females in sports. So you're not going to see happening what's going on right now with this Ivy League, young man who is swimming as a woman.
Breaking all kind of records.
And dominating the whole Ivy League. And really it's an absolute destruction of what it means to be a woman, and certainly an obliteration of women's sports, which every woman should be absolutely insulted, but every man who cares about their daughters or women in general should equally be outraged. And so I think it's just common sense bill, which is basically saying that a biological man cannot compete in a biological woman's sport, no matter whether they think or believe they're a female or not, which would be a big win for girls' sports here in Indiana. The problem is sometimes as these bills go along, things get gutted. And in this particular bill, it did not apply to collegiate sports, which makes no sense. Somehow when you get to college, biology doesn't matter just because you're in a more leftist liberal crowd,
Yeah.
So anyway, I think they're still fighting to get the collegiate sports put in there as well. Otherwise, it's ridiculous. You got high school girls competing to be the best, and they go off to college only to have a man competing in their sport, and they no longer can achieve their goals. So anyway, that would be a tragedy. But the other bill was dealing with protecting parents and protecting students. It dealt with the teaching of critical race theory, divisive concepts, and really this in-school counseling. It goes by a different name, but basically it is a school official offering personal private counseling to your student without parental knowledge. And of course, this is a no-brainer for us as parents, because we believe our children are our responsibility before God. And even when we send them off to schools, teachers and superintendents and school boards and all of that are still accountable to parents. I mean, they're working on our behalf. They're working with delegated authority. The problem is there are many teachers unions and superintendents and power brokers in public schools that believe that once those kids come to school, they belong to the state at that point. And so teachers unions always fight against this type of thing. In fact, The latest bill, when it went to the Senate, was completely gutted by the Rogers Amendment, which pretty much took all the enforcement teeth out of the bill. In other words, you're a parent, your kid comes home from a school district, and we've outlawed teaching critical race theory. It's divisive, it's poisonous, it lies about American history. You don't want it, and all of a sudden your kid has homework that is CRT. So what do? Well, with the bill as it was originally written, the teacher or this parent would have recourse to say, you just violated the law here, and there was punishment involved. There was an enforcement policy so that school boards, teachers, et cetera, superintendents had to comply. And if they didn't, there were punishment, real punishment. Well, all that's been gutted, and so now, again, you might have a bill on paper, and Michael Clark with the American Family Institution brought out a great illustration. He said back in the 80s there was legislation passed that said, and regarding health classes, that abstinence was the best form of birth control. Wait till you're married, and that was to be taught in every, health class in America or in Indiana. The problem was there was no enforcement policy to make sure that happened, and so it looked good on paper. But if the teacher said, we're not going to teach that, we're going to teach about condoms, and we're going to teach about, every other kind of abortion or whatever in the schools, there was no enforcement. And so that's where this bill is right now. And we need to, again, I'm telling you to call, but it's going to be a week later, but I'm just giving you an update. These are some good battles, but battles we're still fighting. And over things that, again, would have been common sense, a decade ago.
And that's my thing. It's like, I appreciate our representatives, people who share our values, advocating for these policies. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate them.
Yeah.
But for me, these are just Band-Aids. We're like, oh, this attack is coming, we got to ward off this attack. This attack is coming, warding off this attack. And you might feel the same frustration I do, which is like, I feel like we're just playing defense. You play defense all day long, you're not going to win the game.
Yeah.
You just delaying the inevitable.
Yeah.
See, this is why, and this transition to the topic that you and I want to chat about, a new ministry, well, we're relaunching, is how do we actually go on the offensive? How do we actually bring righteousness to these different arenas? Yeah. For too long, see, this stirs up a fire in my heart, because for too long, the church, and when I talk about church, I mean like the corporate body, not the institutional. The corporate body in America has abandoned education, abandoned government, abandoned the marketplace, abandoned entertainment. We have segregated ourselves in the church and four walls of the church and say, hey, that's all going to hell anyway. We're gonna just wait till Jesus. Whatever mentality you have, we have separated work from worship. And now we're reaping the fruit of all these different things. Yeah. For us to go on the offensive is not just through legislation. Legislation is just a Band-Aid. It's just a deterrent. Right. For us to go on offensive, we have to actually usher in the kingdom of God in all these different arenas. And that's the reason we start our market share, to, again, change minds and hearts to say work is worship. That when you go to work every day, that's your number one ministry. And when you go home, you're ministering to your family.
And let me just say, that concept is radical because of, quote, separation of church and state.
Yeah.
We've been taught that we're not allowed to bring our Christian values into the marketplace, that's a violation, like that belongs in your home or belongs in church.
Right.
But the radical thing is we're saying Jesus Christ is Lord of all. And if you're a Christian, you don't leave your Christian views at home. That's why we have conscience protection and religious liberty. It
Absolutely.
basically says you're able to practice your faith wherever you go. You can't hermetically seal your faith into a little Ziploc baggie and leave it off to the side. Your faith is who you are. It's our life.
That's called disintegration. It's you're compartmentalized, whereas we function best when we're integrated as a whole. And that shares that market shares. Like a lot of these idea of like the separation of like the empirical truth and like your truth, your own philosophy comes from the Enlightenment. These philosophy is ingrained in us. It's deep, for years and years and years and years, so deeply ingrained in us that we don't even recognize it anymore. So when we speak out publicly about these issues, we almost feel intimidated because that's the pervading culture. Right. But we got to change. So for us to face these issues, that's like shoving these crazy things down our throat. We have to really face the root of this.
Well, and like you said, these issues are all being battled now at the State House, and when we as Christians start speaking out about them, we get attacked from multiple sources. We got the secularists who are saying, stay in your lane. You have no opinion.
Yeah, you have no authority in this, right?
No authority, no opinion. Thank you, Christians. Keep your mouth shut. And then you have Christians who are saying, stay in your lane.
You make us look bad. You know?
Yeah, just tell Bible stories at church and don't really get to where the battle's being fought.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, I've heard it said before, for instance, the governor of the state of Indiana is going to touch more lives directly than I am as a local pastor at a local church in Crown Point, Indiana. That's just the truth. The governor has authority over everybody in the state in terms of his role or her role, and the laws that are passed touch us all.
Yeah.
And so for us not to care about, for instance, who's the next governor, or for us not to care about whether our local officials are godly people that love Jesus and love righteousness is just, it's setting ourselves up for all this chaos that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, we are establishing this idea of disintegration of our philosophical, what we truly believe in, what we do, which is unhealthy and ends up being bad policy.
I mean, go back to the truckers. Tell me if you don't think government's important when you're having a peaceful protest. You got kids, your own children with you, and jumpy toys or whatever playing on the street.
Castles or
you got
bounce
people
castles,
singing, the Canadian national anthem, and they're there to simply have a peaceful protest, because we're not talking about, we disagree with this law, because we can all disagree with laws. We're talking about laws that literally seek to destroy your livelihood. Like, you're not going to be able to do business in this state as a trucker if you're not vaccinated and have proof of your vaccine. I mean, this is designed, either you comply or we destroy you. So this is a legitimate, peaceful, democratic, righteous form of protest. And they're coming in now, freezing your personal, finance account, which basically means we're going to starve you. You have no resources. We're going to track you down. We're going to fine you. We're going to use tear gas to get you out of your truck. We're going to plow over you with mounted police on horses. And can you sit back now as a Canadian Christian and go, well, we really shouldn't be involved, in government. We should just focus on preaching the gospel. That sounds really great until you and your livelihood and your family are being destroyed simply because you disagree with whoever's in power.
And the interesting thing is when you have these rioting and all this stuff, you got some Christians, who are self-proclaimed Christian, who are all like, but it's about social justice, and they jump in and they use religious language. Right. About all those different things. It's like, well, why not religious language for these things? It's like religion only allows you to protest certain things, but not other things.
Well, and let's look at the nature of protest. A civil, righteous, godly protest is peaceful. It does not involve injuring other people. It does not involve the destruction of personal property. These two protests are night and day.
Yeah.
When no one's burning down the Capitol, nobody there is shooting at police officers or anything like that. So they're apples and oranges once again. But we have a religious crowd that's supporting the burning down of buildings and all that in the name of social justice. But then you got the same crowd that would be crying out, why aren't you submitting to your government right now? That's not right for you to park your trucks and stop everything. And again, it's apples and oranges. There is a legitimate form of peaceful protest, the right to assemble, the right to share your opinions, the right to call for meetings to try to work through things, which again they've tried to do, and their own government won't meet with the leaders. Instead, they're just seeking to destroy the leaders. So,
but back to even what we're doing here is, we started market share because we want to engage. We said, hey, you know what? We want to really engage. We don't want to just wait for Band-Aid at the State House, which, again, I appreciate that. But we want to engage in our culture. We want to reveal the kingdom of God in our workplace. That's really the purpose of market share for anyone who works, to change our mentality, change our heart, to say, no, there's no compartmentalization. We want to minister when we go into work, whether you're a leader or you're a frontline worker. Yeah. But we're also starting or relaunching a new ministry that wants to engage in the governmental realm. Yeah.
Over the last 2.5 years since I call it COVID craziness, not to deny that COVID is real or that people have been, hurt by this. But the government overreach, really the control behind it, the government using this COVID as a mask, really to implement all kinds of overreach and power. It's not healthy. We have seen in our church an influx of, I just call them patriots. They're people who appreciate the fact that we pushed back, appreciate the fact that we stayed open, that we kept being preaching the gospel, loving people. We leaned into the problem. We didn't run from the problem. We didn't buy into that mentality that says we're loving our neighbor if we just lock ourselves in our houses and don't come out. We just rejected all of that, and we moved forward in faith, and we loved people, and we trusted the Lord. And as a result, as you know, we're now reaching the point where we probably quadrupled in 2 years. We're experiencing crazy, fruit on all sides. And I'll just put a little comma there, because I think we need to highlight some of that fruit. Now, we just set a record in our children's ministry Sunday.
Yeah, we had a higher, this past Sunday, which for you guys would be 2 Sundays ago, we had our highest number of children between 2 services.
February, single digits, cold, Northwest Indiana. This is certainly not, your banner month. I mean, we had a call out for family mission trip. We had 100 applications taken on the very first day. I think 90 people are planning on going on our family mission trip this summer. Basically, every single ministry is exploding. I mean, right across the board.
Our men's and women encounters are really full.
And that kind of ties into what we're talking about, getting healed from shame. But we do a men's and women's encounter that basically holds about 90 to 100 people. And within a moment's time, those things are just jam-packed and full. We have to turn people away. And it's because, I believe this, it's because people are looking for leadership. They're looking for pastors to provide strong principled leadership from the pulpit and talk about issues that matter, that are facing Americans. They're looking for presence. They're looking for the Holy Spirit. And where the Holy Spirit is honored, people's lives are getting changed and transformed. And they're patriotic people who are concerned about this nation. And we're just, like I said, everything that's happening right now is just God's blessing, and things are blowing up, which leads to the start of Marketplace, which leads to the Common Ground ministry that was birthed. And now I really believe it's time. I had a call out Sunday for a ministry that we've had conceptually now in our hearts for over a decade. It's called Public Square. And the idea of Public Square is the plumb line that is established that tells whether something is right and true. And the church's job is obviously we're not at the State House making laws. We're not government. We have a different role, but we have a role of holding the plumb line. It's not a plumb line we created. It's the plumb line God created. It's thus saith the Lord. It's public righteousness. It's determining whether a bill is godly or ungodly, whether a certain policy promotes good or promotes evil, and holding our politicians responsible and holding their feet to the law of God. That's the plumb line. The plumb line is what's make the public square. It makes everything in order, all right? And it brings justice. And this is the beauty of biblical justice. When we talk about righteousness, it blesses everybody, whether you believe in God or not. So we are really feeling like it's the season to pull that group together and really get some traction, especially with an election coming up. We had a call out on Sunday, and the response was amazing. We'll follow it up this week. But I'm talking about, we could have a couple hundred people that are concerned about and want to get involved. Yep. And that we're really trying to mobilize, not to be political. That's important. We're not promoting a certain party. We're not even trying to create a third party. We're not political in nature, but we are prophetic in nature. And it ties back into the lordship of Jesus. Why would the church be involved in getting good people elected? Why would the church be involved in speaking out on the concern over certain bills, or speaking into bills, or calling our representatives, or calling the governor on certain things? It's because Jesus is Lord of all, and He's Lord of government. Mm-hmm. And so for us not to get involved in public policy means we just basically hand the keys over to ungodly people who are going to promote all kinds of perversions in the name of government.
I think the way I think about this, like to become a leader at a church, it's a calling from God. To be a leader in the marketplace, to be a frontline leader, to be a frontline worker in the marketplace is a calling.
Yeah.
It might not be a permanent calling, but it's a calling for the season. Like when you see it as a calling from God, you treat it as worship because God has designated to say, hey, this is where I want you to be, or I delight in you and I enjoy you doing this job. When you go into work, that's a calling.
Yep.
How about governmental? How about governing positions? How about being a mayor or city council or school board?
Yeah.
Do we just say, well, that's nothing to do with God. God doesn't care about that at all. No, it's a calling from God.
Pastors used to see their role as disciplers of community leaders. And so where's the next business leader going to come from? The church. Where's the next education leader going to come from? The church. How about this? Where's the next governor going to come from? Well, they might be sitting in your church on Sunday morning, and if the pulpit does not envision people with those callings, they're going to feel like that calling is not holy or sacred unto the Lord, and that they have to leave the church to go figure out how to be a politician or a government official.
How many elected officials that they give a good talk and then when they get to D.C. or they go to the State House, all of a sudden, because of the influence there and the lack of support from home, a lack of godly encouragement and support, because you know how it is. When you're isolated, you're by yourself, you're surrounded by complete different influences, you change.
Yeah.
So where's the influence from local churches, from godly people who's going to come around you and say, we're praying for you, we're encouraging you, don't cave. I know this is a tough season. I know there's temptation all around, but don't cave. We got your back. That's what we need,
So that's well said, and that's what we're looking to launch leading up to this next midterm election, because so much is at stake.
Yeah.
And we just want people to be mobilized, to get behind good candidates, not promoting a candidate or a party, but get behind people that share our values and help raise up people from within our church that would be the ones that champion those causes for righteousness. So anyway, I'm very, very excited about that. That'll be let me see. Yeah. By the time this airs, we will have just had our first meeting, but it's called Public Square. You can check it out on our Living Stones website. And I think this is good because in politics, what you find today is when you're debating a certain bill, people always try to claim the moral high ground, and then a tactic is they shame people on the other side, like you're behind the times, you're on the wrong side of history. You're a bigot. That all the name calling. It's all rooted in shame, and that's exactly what we're talking about now on Sunday mornings in our series on the great relationship killer, which is shame. And it's those areas where we feel, it's one thing to say I disagree with this policy. It's another thing to say you're an evil person for even wanting to support it.
Yeah.
That's what shame does. It says I'm the bad guy, and then you got to spend all your time trying to backpedal. No. I'm really not a bad guy, and conservatives do this all the time. But let's talk today. You did an amazing job team teaching with me on this topic. And in fact, as we were getting ready to come up here, you were talking with your dentist.
Yeah.
And I know this is a sore spot for you, the word dentist.
Yeah.
But you were just saying, you're paying for, I guess, shame, for not dealing with shame or dealing with what came into your mind when you think of the dentist, for avoidance behavior. But talk a little bit about that, because one thing, if you've heard Pastor Andrew preach on this topic, what I love about him is he's just real. The stories that you share are profound. They're stories people can identify with, and I know many people in our church are really getting touched right now by this whole topic of shame. So talk a little bit about how all that relates to the shame for you.
I think this is where it gets confusing, because shame will do everything it can, or the devil will do everything it can to hide shame so you can't recognize it.
Right.
But that's what we want to clarify. Shame is the feeling that you're not enough, okay? You're not worthy, and you're not valuable. So
and even to back up, shame, I think this is important. Shame is a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that, it's the feeling that something's not right. You're not good enough, that you're not enough.
Right.
And then fear comes in, and there's a lot of things mixed in there. But it hits us at the emotional level first.
Yep.
Which is why it's hard for us to identify it.
And a lot of times we don't even want to articulate it because it's a feeling. We feel embarrassed. We feel shameful for our feelings.
Right.
But
we're ashamed of being shamed.
Ashamed of being shamed, right. So, for me, I am generally, I'm not a procrastinator. I get things done.
Yes,
I'm forward thinking. I plan things well. I am studious with my fineness. Pretty good with those stuff. I haven't always been good, but the last several years, the last decade, I've really worked on those things. That's my wiring. But with my teeth, it's just a huge blind spot. And recently I had some major teeth pain, and I keep playing it off like, oh, it must be something else. And eventually the pain was so great, I had to go see a dentist. And I went to go see a dentist and come out with a several $1,000 bill. I haven't done it yet, but potential bill.
Sure.
Right. And I felt so much shame, and I'm like, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that.
Just to back up, why did that realization that you needed to get your tooth fixed and it was going to cost some money, why did that cause shame? I mean, people get their teeth fixed all the time.
Well, it caused shame because there's so many things I could have done, I should have done. The regular checkup, getting a night guard for my teeth, all these things I know I should have done, but I didn't do. And
so it's the could have and should have.
You feel regrets,
like you failed. And
now I'm going to cost my family all these money. And the reason, and here's the thing, is the reason I didn't do those things is because I had previous shame with my teeth. When I was young, I had a lot of teeth issues. So when I went to the dentist, I felt shame because I didn't brush my teeth right, or I felt shame by the dentist. I felt shame that I spent money, my parents' money. We didn't have a lot of money, so we spent all the money. I felt just there was an emotional bubble there, emotional hindrance there. So in other areas of my life, I'm like, yeah, I got to eat correctly. I get energized by eating correctly to take good care of my health. I get energized to exercise so I can be proactive. I get energized to not buy what I can't afford. Those are energizing for me to be proactive. With my teeth, my brain doesn't even go there. My brain is completely compartmentalized, completely disintegrated with shame. I'm like, I'm not even processing that. I'm not thinking about that. I should probably get a night guard. Nope. I'm not going to think about it. I should go get a checkup. Nope, I'm not thinking about it.
So listen, because I attest to the fact that Andrew is incredibly proactive, hard worker, amazing. But in this area, it's interesting. It's almost like a tooth decay as an illustration.
Yeah.
You have a spot that's sensitive or whatever, and there's maybe it needs to be cleaned, or you need to do a better job, brushing your teeth, but you don't, and then it gets a little worse, and before you know it, you're in extreme pain, and what could have been solved early on, if it was addressed, now becomes a major issue. And but it's what's interesting, like you said, that this is just a little bubble of your life. It's like dental. Everything else is great.
Well, not everything else.
No, I would say you're doing pretty good. But it's interesting because again, it's such a picture of how shame gets us stuck.
Yeah.
If we don't address it. This happened to you when you were a child. That's where that door was open, right? The shame door. And because you never either identified it as shame or addressed it properly, now as an adult, the issues are bigger. And I think, think about all these issues people deal with their marriages or with their parenting or just their lives in general, because they haven't dealt with something in the past properly. They're still stuck there, and now it just gets worse. Like marriage, it happens in marriage all the time. What could have been just a simple misunderstanding ends up in a full-blown divorce.
Because you don't address, because there was that initial feeling as a child, I felt like I was not worthy. I was not enough. I screwed up. And that shame just simmered. It was like a hidden virus. Just simmered there.
I call it a low-grade fever. It's not enough to knock you out, but you're still not feeling quite right.
Right. It's just under the radar, subtle, and absorbing energy, and then just keeping you from doing what you need to do. You cannot recruit all your brain to make the best decision. I was talking with some business guys the other day. I said, look, as a business owner, your number one job is to make the best decision, to solve problem, make the best decision. But because of shame, you end up not recruiting all your facilities, all your abilities to make these decisions. So it's like I chose not to use all my facilities. I don't even talk to my wife about it because she has no shame with teeth. She looks at me, she's like, why wouldn't you go get a checkup? She doesn't even understand.
Right.
And I look at myself, I'm like, why do you go get a checkup? It's so painful, it's so degrading, it's so terrible, because in my mind, that's what it's blown up to. Right. But when I saw through her lens, I'm like, wow, the problem is in my heart.
Yeah. And again, this is not the insurmountable problem. God will provide.
Sure,
get your tooth fixed. People get crowns all the time. This is not like a unique situation. But what's unique is the way you've had to process it all, and the shame that's been attached to that.
Yeah.
But I just appreciate that as an example. You also shared a couple other examples that I thought were so powerful. A young Asian man in school that basically compared himself with you, put you down. I'm better than you in everything. That hits you powerfully when you're a kid, and it sends these messages into your head that says you're not enough. You can't compete. You're second rate. And here's, back to the business example. When we don't have shame, we're able to aggressively jump into whatever the situation is. We have all the energy. We're creative. We're excited. We're like, hey, how do we solve this problem? But when shame is there, you're thinking do I have what it takes to solve the problem? Am I smart enough? What if I don't solve the problem? What if? And it's interesting how it all creates disintegration in our minds.
There's a whole cloud. You're in a fog. You cannot see the picture clearly. I mean, I know parents, myself included, that because of shame, because of your own mistake, or because you didn't correct your kids right, the next time you might be hesitant and you might enable them and not correct them all because of shame. Going back to the example of David, and that's a mega issue. But on the micro scale of just that's why a lot of times parents don't necessarily address issue with their kids and let them kind of go wild because of shame, or they address it too strongly.
Right. So it's either the passive kind of paralyzed parent, which is what David was. Here his son commits an egregious sin against his own half-sister, and David's mad about it, but he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because, again, he's probably processing through his own shame, like deja vu, this happened to me, so I'm going to be soft on my son or whatever. Same thing with Absalom. He had the same problem with Absalom when Absalom was leading a full-blown rebellion, right? And he never disciplined his son. That's why he had that problem. So think about how many of our young people, like you said, it's either a harshness, an overreaction, an over strictness and anger and discipline, or a complete passivity. Right. Talk about how shame produces the anger and the overreaction.
Yeah, and I think I shared this example. I don't remember what service, maybe a third service I shared.
It all gets confusing.
Yeah, did I share a podcast or a second service or? But Adam and Eve, they respond to shame through hiding. But Cain, their son, responded to shame when he offered a sacrifice that wasn't as pleasing as Abel's sacrifice, and God confronted him, really as a loving father. I mean, God, the created universe, coming and warning you and say, "Hey, sin's crouching at your doorstep. You better watch out."
Right.
He interpreted that through the lens of shame. His narrative was God doesn't love me. He said, "I'm not enough. I'm not worthy." So
back to the issue of the sacrifice. God looked beyond the sacrifice itself and saw the condition of his heart.
Right.
And he said, I'm not pleased with what you're offering because of what's going on the inside. God's trying to help him. He's trying to father him.
He's trying to father him. God was pursuing.
Shaming.
No, he was pursuing him. But again, shame has already twisted his whole narrative. And he sees God's pursuit as shaming or degrading, and he felt, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. Of course, I'm reading to him. The Bible doesn't say specifically those things. But out of anger, he killed Abel.
Right.
And for men, a lot of men that I know, that our manifestation of shame is not through, for some men they hide, but for others, me in particular, I take out my frustration. It comes off in frustration. I get angry. I get upset. I think a lot of times when people have road rage or just this unexpressible rage, it's because deep in their soul, deep in the heart, there's a sense that I'm not enough. Right. And I'm angry and I feel helpless and I'm cornered. I'm cornered, so I have to, what do you do when the cornered animal? You rage out. Yeah.
In my own life, if you think of areas where you're not competent, just in like electronically or with computers, if something goes wrong, I'm in trouble. I don't, it's not intuitive for me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to fix it. And I'm not a handyman. I didn't grow up with a father who taught me how to swing hammers and use power tools and all that kind of stuff. So if something at home breaks, instantly I get into this mode of anxiety, or if you were a real husband, you'd know how to fix this. You beat yourself
even
up.
though your wife would never say it to you or nor feel that way.
She married me for who I am, and she's very affirming. In fact, she's much more of a handy woman than I am a handy man. Right. But my point is, when something's not working the way it's supposed to be, or I've tried home improvement projects, right, where you watch the video, okay, I can do that, and invariably, it's not like what showed on the video. That's the video.
More crooked.
Look like that. Yeah. And then I end up causing more frustration, more pain, more disaster. Like it would have been easier if I just called somebody in the first place because they would know what in the world to do. Yeah. But all those areas kind of feed back into shame. And for a man, it's you don't have what it takes. Yeah. You're not enough. And you're not doing what you need to be doing. You're not being who you need to be. And then And then if something else happened, or say my kids are the cause of the breakdown, like my kid broke the thing that I can't fix, then I'm mad at my kid.
Yeah, we project all our frustration onto our kids.
Come on, this was brand new. Why didn't you take care of this? Because now I don't know how to fix this thing you just broke.
Oh yeah, that's where he and I really connect, because I'm blessed for so many handymans in my life, including my wife. Like my wife too, she's so much better at fixing things than I do. But even when she started fixing things, now I don't feel it anymore. Now I'm like, hey, babe, you do it. But in the beginning, it's like, well, I gave up. I just surrender. I don't know about how secure I feel. I'm just like, it's, but in the beginning, it's like, man, I'm such a loser. I can't even fix this. One example just came to my mind. On this past Christmas morning, one of my kids' toys, Christmas present opening toys, and like, you got to put it together. And
I hate those kind of toys.
Oh my gosh. Would I ever learn not to get complicated toys for my kids? Because kids would put it together. And I'm terrible. Like spatial recognition, all that stuff. I'm just terrible at it, right? So I'm on Sunday morning trying to put this thing together for my son. He didn't care. He's moving along. He's playing with other things.
Right.
I'm about to lose my mind because I can't put this together, okay? And my wife is like, why are you doing this to yourself? It's Christmas morning. Enjoy the meal. Enjoy your kids.
You're all stressed out.
I'm there losing my mind.
Your kid's probably playing with the box the toy came in.
Exactly. They're moved on. They're like, Dad is being weird right now. Mom, you need to say something to him. And I'm just like, why won't this fit? I'm losing my mind. And again, completely irrational. My brain's completely disintegrated. I'm in a different world. I'm at World War III. It's Christmas morning. And later I thought back. Eventually, like, my wife gave me enough nudge. I'm like, okay, I just gave up. I felt like a total, when I just put the toy aside, I felt like I think it was like a transformer I couldn't transform, or whatever it is. I ended up having to YouTube it.
You got transformed into a demonized man.
I know, exactly. I had to YouTube it because it was so hard. The point is, I look back and I thought through, I'm like, what did that happen?
Yeah.
It's because I fell completely into shame. Because when I was younger, I had some toys, and it broke, or I didn't get. I don't want to go in the whole story. The point is, when I was younger with toys, that was a huge area of shame for me. I'm not enough. I don't get the good thing. There was bubble of shame there, lurking all these decades under the radar when I started playing with toys. And then on Christmas morning in 2021, it reared its ugly head and it says, Andrew, you're not enough in that moment. And I was completely sucked into a shame storm.
Right, but you weren't able to process like the journey.
No.
You're just in this swirl of emotion.
I became the Hulk on Sunday morning over the Transformer. But reading that book gave me such clarity, because when that happens again, this morning my son was whining because something won't work, and I was trying to fix it, and I felt that emergence of that, you're not enough, you're a loser. I was just like, look, I'm not even going to argue with you. I am enough. Jesus said I'm enough. I'm put it aside, and I put that toy aside. So how am I able to overcome that? It's by recognizing what's happening. And with my wife helping me alongside of me, saying, Andrew, this is what's happening again. So anyways.
I had a man that was talking to me, just sharing honestly about, dealing with shame and frustration. And it was regarding marriage class. Now, our marriage class is great, and he thinks our marriage class is great. Yeah. But when his wife, he's worked a long week, he's tired. Sometimes on Sunday, he'd like just to stay home and spend time with his wife. Yeah. And she's all excited about coming to marriage class, because for her, she's got friends and they're together and they're working on their marriage. And, it says to her that my man's committed to our marriage and security and safety, and we're moving forward and there's people and we're having fun. And I could relate to his comment, because he said, when she says, no, we have to go to marriage class, the way he interprets that is, you don't think our marriage is good. Yeah. You don't think I'm being a good husband. Yeah. I'm working hard. I'm providing. I love you. I want to be with you, and you got to go off to marriage class. And so I'm interpreting that as I'm not enough. And I can relate to that. Sometimes when our wives suggest things, or they're trying to help us, like his wife was not saying our marriage is terrible. We need to go to marriage class. His wife was saying, I'm so excited to be with you, experiencing marriage class together, working on having an even better marriage. She wasn't being critical at all. Yeah. But the voice inside of his head, which I think is the voice you and I and every person can identify with, the voice that says, she doesn't think you're enough, or she's not satisfied, or she's not appreciative, or she's not grateful. And it's amazing how the enemy goes after those things in our mind.
It funnels down to, hey, why is she not satisfied? I'm not enough. And it plays off all these fears, anxiety, deep identity issues. And I mean, it could be simple as, hey, honey, how about a new couch? Spiral.
What's the matter with our old couch?
Yeah.
You know how much couches are? You know how hard they have to work?
And how about this? Like, this used to trigger me. Hey, we haven't gone on a date in a while. You know, what's my wife asking? She's saying, hey, I would love to go on a date with you.
What she's complimenting you.
She's
saying,
I want to be with you, right?
With you, yeah.
But is that what we hear? No. I mean, it took me years to learn no. Because what I heard was, you don't spend enough time with me. You don't spend enough time with kids.
I got all these places to juggle. I'm trying to
and I literally say to her, it's like, I can't do enough. I feel like I'm going 100% and I'm not enough.
Yeah. Well, I can relate, in a growing church. You might have, 19 great ministries, but somebody comes up and says, how come we don't have this ministry? And I'm like, loser, terrible pastor.
Or this area would not do well, and this thing did not connect right, and all these different. And they're not bad comments. They're good feedback. I appreciate those feedback. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But what shame tries to do is twist that to say, all
you're
those
not
things.
enough.
You're not enough. Yeah.
And that's the devil again, playing off of our insecurities and overwhelming us with that swirl of emotion that takes us to a really bad place. So we're getting a lot of great feedback on this series because shame is something. It's like the air we breathe. I mean, maybe you have your own stories that are popping into your mind. And just what you said, and maybe that's the takeaway for today, is the first step to really getting healed from shame is to be aware of the fact that it is shame. Because it gets clouded and it gets masked and it gets hidden in a bunch of emotion or a bunch of other emotions like anger or passivity or whatever that just hides the real root of that. So you're going to go off to the dentist and you're going to get everything fixed, and maybe you could even play with a toy while you're doing it and experience.
I'll work on my transformer while doing the root canal on me. Yeah.
But it's interesting because there's another principle we'll talk about. Shame is really healed in the process of kind of facing the very thing that was the source of our shame and learning how to process it differently. Yeah. And so we hope this has been helpful for you as we talk about these things. We encourage you, if you haven't listened to the podcast or to the Sunday service, you can go to our website at hailstones.org and listen to that. But we think it'll be very, very helpful to you. In fact, by the time you're watching this podcast, we will have had a couple more Sunday messages that were really good. We'll probably get into those in the weeks to come. On how we can learn from Jesus on how to process our shame. And then on the heels of that, we're going to be talking about the violent attack that Jesus underwent that was really an attack on his identity as the Son of God, which is really Satan's, again, major relationship killer at work here is his scheme, which is shame. And how Satan over and over again tried to bring shame into Jesus' life to get him to question who he was, what authority he had, why he was doing what he was doing, and whether he was really enough to get the job done. Yep. And of course, in all those situations, Jesus came through as a shining example that he has what it takes, that he's worthy, that he's chosen, that he's the Savior, that he is who God says he is, and that he's dearly beloved. He brings his Father joy. And these are two things, identity and unconditional love. Ministering out of those two realities is really the key to being successful, fruitful, joyful in all areas of our life. Knowing who we are and knowing that we're greatly loved by our Father. Amen. And so we want to remind you of that in Christ you do have what it takes. God is with you. He's for you. He'll not leave you. He loves you, and you bring him great joy. Those are powerful truths to remind yourself with today. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for spending this time with us. We hope it's an encouragement to you in the middle of your week. And we just look forward to perhaps connecting with you again at this format or seeing you face to face at one of the many ministries we have going on here at Living Stones Church at Crown Point. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next week, have an amazing, amazing week. Keep your head up, stay out of shame, and keep living in the joy and favor of the Lord.